Welcome, everybody, to the Doctrines of Rad, episode 52. It's still hard to believe for me that we have made it to 52 episodes and that anybody watches this show. So excited to be here. I'm Drew, one of the Doctrines of Rad, and I'm joined with a special guest who I've really been excited to get on this show. I've been following him on X/Twitter, as most of you would know. His name is Jesse Hughes. He is a senior at Liberty University, and he is the chairman of college Republicans at Liberty.
Yep.
Somebody that I have seen interacting with folks on X, really has been involved socially, social media wise, talking about Christian stuff, talking about politics, talking about sports. I mean, he also has a show, a podcast that's going to be coming out here January 26th called The Jesse Hughes Show. So if you like what he has to say today, get ready and, be preemptively ready to subscribe to his show. Jesse, thank you for coming out and hanging out with me today.
Yeah, Drew, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I appreciate that, man. It really, one of the most exciting things that I've seen from you, and it's probably not, well, maybe it's kind of exciting for you as well. You were actually featured in a video on the comments section with Brett Cooper pretty
Yep.
recently. And in fact, I was scrolling through my YouTube shorts just the other day and I saw it popped back up again. So it's making its rounds again on social media. The question, can you talk me through that? Like how you ended up, what was the interview? What was the question? How did that go?
All right. So, at Liberty, there is a on-campus think tank called the Standing for Freedom Center. That is, its purpose is to get students engaged with controversial topics, with the hot button issues that are being discussed in culture today. And one of those issues is, should women be in the draft? Should women be in military service at all? That discussion. And so one of my friends, his name's Grant May. You can follow him at the real Grant May. He's an amazing guy. You should go check out his stuff. He helps with Freedom Center. He does a lot of man on the street interviews with students. And so he just casually asked me, he's like, "Hey, this is the topic. This is what we're discussing. Do you want to be interviewed?" And I was just like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" I'll go in for the heck of it. So he asked me, should women be allowed in the draft? I said no. He asked me why not, and I went into the typical Christian view that men and women have different roles. God designated those roles. It's not our place to mess with that, and that it's men who are supposed to be protectors and providers, and any society that would dare send its mothers and daughters off to war, make them fight, is, in my opinion, a very weak and feeble place.
Absolutely.
Which you can look around today and make that argument for the United States, certainly. But I gave my answer. Next thing I know, that video, the Freedom Center post that video, it goes viral on Instagram Reels and on TikTok. And apparently I have about the most screen time of anybody that they interviewed in the clip.
Oh yeah.
And so everybody is obviously talking about me, which was a little bit shocking. But you had people saying "red tie guy" because I was wearing a red tie. Red
Yeah.
tie guy went off. Red tie guy absolutely destroyed it. He killed it. Everybody was talking about what I specifically was saying, which kind of was a little bit crazy, a little bit surreal. About a week later, I'm sitting in the campus dining hall. We call it the Rot. Long story. The food is actually decent, so that's not why, but we call it the Rot. So I'm sitting in
Sure.
the Rot with my roommate, and all of a sudden my phone just starts blowing up, and I'm like, "What is happening? What's going on?" I go and I look, and I have like 50 people sending me the link to a TikTok from the comment section of Brett Cooper not only reacting to that reel, but specifically reacting to my part.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I did not know. I was it was shocking. It was insane. I'm still a little bit in awe, thinking about it, and it's been a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like you said, it keeps kind of making the rounds on social media. I've had at least 50 of my friends send it to me, either
Wow.
through YouTube Shorts or through TikTok saying, "Hey, did you see this? Hey, you'll never believe what I just saw. Hey, look
Yeah.
at this." So it's crazy. And so, I just have this strange feeling that no matter what I end up doing in my career, I'm still gonna have a lot of people be like, "Oh, aren't you Red Tie Guy from Brett Cooper?"
Red
Actually,
tie guy.
funnily enough, I was standing in line at a there's a Starbucks on campus in the student union. I was standing in line for coffee, and this girl behind me comes up to me and she says, "Hey, random question, but do you know who Brett Cooper is?" And I'm just like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So I've been
th-
recognized in public because of this.
yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. And I mean it's one thing um to have that recognition, like to be acknowledged for what you're doing, where you're at, but really the content of what you said is not something that is popular. I mean, it's
No, for
not
sure not.
a I mean, in today's postmodern world, where everybody says, men and women are completely equal, can completely do the same thing. We don't have any real standard when it comes to, especially not a godly standard when it comes to sending our women, our wives, and our daughters into battle, into a situation that is really not, it's not God ordained to put our women in a combat role. Even really, I mean, I would go as far as even in an administrative role when it comes to the military, because of the nature of the business of military, of the business of war. Putting our women at risk, even at home. Like, again, like I said, that the administrative piece of that, it still makes them a target, and I think that makes them. It's our duty to cherish our wives and our
Mhm.
daughters, our mothers. It's our duty to protect them, because they bring life. I mean, they give birth to our children. They nurture our kids. They make our homes. When we dismiss them so much to the point where they're out there fighting a war that the men should be fighting, I think that's a judgment from the Lord. What are some more of your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Like, talk me through some more of that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. If you go to the videos, you'll see some comments from some people, some women who have served in the military who are saying, "Oh, what about my service? Oh, what about this? What about that?" And I just want to say, for one, thank you for your service. But personally, I don't think that you should have been out there.
Right.
I respect the fact that you were, but I don't think been that shouldn't have been a situation that you even got involved in, and it's not necessarily always their fault, because we live in a culture, like you said, that it's been seeped in this idea that men and women are completely equal, can do all the same things. We've been in seeped in this culture for a few decades now, and so um, a lot of people just don't even think about what they're doing and whether or not this is something that should. It's just something that's normalized and accepted.
Right.
And so a lot of people say, "Oh, what about my service?" Well, I respect the fact that you served,
Of course.
but I don't think that our culture should be in the place where that is normalized. And, that's not necessarily your fault, but
Right.
that's something broader culturally that we need to address and we need to talk about and have a broader conversation about because, like you said, I don't think that women should be in combat roles at all, and I didn't even really think about the administrative part that you brought up. I do think that's something definitely to consider. I know that a lot of people bring up like, "Oh, what about like having them as nurses and stuff?" And there's a debate that could be had around that. I think that if they're away from combat, then yeah, sure, they can serve as a military nurse or whatever
Sure.
in a hospital back in the states or whatever. I just don't think that it is our place as a society to send women into any sort of combat situation at all. And the thing that you brought up about even administrative positions, that's something worth at least discussing and
Yeah,
debating and having a
absolutely.
conversation about.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the nursing thing. I think I do tend to agree. I think back to Pearl Harbor, kind of the time where the women were serving in the capacity of the Wave Corps, were focused on nursing. I mean, there was a need for that. I do think that could be a discussion I think, unfortunately, the way that warfare seems to be designed now, uh, the conventional war that we used to fight, where even the medics themselves were kind of considered off the table. Like we, in the Geneva Conventions and various other kind of war doctrine, we would say that if you are in the chaplain corps or if you're in the nurse corps, you're not a combatant. You are there to provide spiritual guidance in the chaplain corps. You're there to provide health and aftercare and medical aid in the nurse corps. But I think the problem that we kind of see now, and particularly in the most recent attack in Israel, is they don't care if you are a woman or a man. It's their ideology far exceeds conventional warfare and the rules of war. So putting women in those roles, even in an administrative role or a nurse
Hmm.
role, at this point, kind of, I mean, if they're in a uniform, if you're the enemy, you're going to target those that are in uniform. And I think that there should be a broader conversation about that. But I mean, the reality is we're not even going to get there until we start talking about transgenders in the military,
Hmm.
until we start talking about homosexuals. I mean, there's a lot involved that would have to be overhauled, even to get to some sense of norm or godly standard in our military in general. That's a conversation probably for even generations past you and I, that
Right.
they have, and hopefully in pursuit, if the Lord decrees and he wills, then the nation going forward will honor God in all of its standards, and maybe we don't have that, or maybe perhaps as the gospel spreads, there will be less war because more people come to know Jesus, they come to serve Yahweh, and then there's far less even need or desire for death and destruction and all of that. But obviously, we're not going to solve that here on this
Right.
podcast. I wish we
We can
could. I
try.
wish, yeah, I know, right? I wish it was that easy, but hopefully
Hey,
your
if they put
comment,
if they put us in charge, I'm just saying a lot of things would look very different, but a lot of things would be better.
it
They
would,
just need to put us in charge.
they just
They
need to
just
put us in charge. Well, speaking of putting us in charge, with your role as the chairman of the College Republicans at Liberty, um, do you have political aspirations? What is your kind of, what's your goal? How did you get into that position? Were you voted in? Was it something that you wanted to do? And then where is that going to take you after college?
All right, so we're gonna kind of back up a little bit because there's some backstory that needs to be. So I actually for a part of my life didn't even care that much about politics. I was raised in a semi-political family, meaning that my mom and my dad both kind of paid attention to more of the presidential stuff that was going on.
Hmm.
Some of my earliest memories are of the 2008 debates where my mom is screaming, "Liar, you lie, and you know you lie," at Barack Obama on
Yeah.
the TV. But my dad, it was funny. My dad didn't really care all that much. He's
Hmm.
more of a blue collar guy. He's a truck driver. He never, from what I remember, could really see that much of a point. And he paid attention. He voted a little. He kind of paid attention. He voted, but he was kind of your typical blue collar guy that didn't really care all that much about it. Didn't have time to really focus on it. And then so 2015 rolls around. I'm sitting at my grandma's house. My grandma's a lot more political than my family is. She's got Fox News on the TV all the time. At that time, she was a lot more political. And next thing you know, I see Donald Trump coming down this escalator on TV, and he announces he's running for president. And my first thought is, isn't this that dude from the TV show, The Apprentice or whatever? Like, who is
Right.
this guy? Why is he running
Right.
for president? And I start paying a little bit more attention because I'm curious. I'm like, Donald Trump, wait, what? He's a Republican. I knew what the word Republican meant. I was raised in a Republican family, kind of had an idea. And so I'm like, Donald Trump's running as a Republican. Wait, what's going on? And so I start looking into this stuff more. And what really got me into it wasn't necessarily debates over policy, debates over abortion, this kind of thing. What got me into it was the boring stuff that most people don't care about, which is
Interesting.
how do primaries work and what is a caucus and how do you run for president? What goes into that? What's all this? So the structure of our government is what initially drew me in, and that's kind of what got me interested. And then after I was interested and hooked in, that's when I started paying more attention to political discussions. I've had a very long journey. I started out as kind of like your, I guess, normie con,
Uh-huh.
and then I went libertarian for a little bit, and then now I've bounced back to whatever you would call me now. But
We're not
I don't know what the
even
label is.
Republicans at this point aren't really sure that we wanna stay Republicans, you know? It's kinda
Right.
like, I don't know."
I I would call myself a conservative, but even some I find myself disagreeing with a lot of conservative Christian nationalist, uh as much baggage as that claim or as that phrase kind of holds. That's honestly like the only thing that really describes me at this point.
Amen,
But
man.
anyway,
Same.
but anyway, um I start paying more attention to politics. Initially, career-wise, I didn't know what I wanted to do. For a while, I wanted to be a musician.
I
I thought
see.
about being a pastor, and then I, got more and more hooked into politics, and I figured that there would be something in that avenue that I could eventually pursue and do. And
Wow.
I'd always kind of had an interest in at least the legal side of things because a short bit of my testimony here, I was adopted. So I
Wow.
was adopted from Russia. I was 5 months old. My
Wow.
story's an incredibly crazy story, um, involving a ton of different stuff. I use it all the time when I'm talking about abortion with people because looking back, my I don't know a ton about my biological family. I know
Mm.
very, very little. I do know that my biological mother was 18 years old when she had me. I do
Wow.
know that I have a biological, at least half, maybe full sister who was 2.5 years older than me. And I
Wow.
do know that there was not a father in the picture. And through research, I know that Russia at that time when I was born had one of the highest abortion rates in the world.
Jeez.
So I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Just being I should not be where I am. And not only that, but after I was born with I don't know the exact medical term, but I was born with an upper airway blockage, which
Mm.
when I would have episodes where my airway would shrink to the size of a Capri Sun straw. Um, I coded, as they say in hospital terms, at least twice that I can think of before I turned 5 when after my parents had adopted me. So like me being here today is truly a example of God's sovereignty in all things
Amen.
because
Wow.
I should not be alive.
Praise
Um,
God.
if I had not been adopted, I probably would have died, and if by some miracle I did not die before I turned 5, I know I'd be fighting in Ukraine right now, probably
Yeah.
conscripted or off the street because in Russia, the way that it works is once you turn 16, they kick you out of the orphanage, you're on your own. So, if I would have even survived to that point, I'd be out on the streets, probably would have been conscripted. So just the fact that I'm sitting here today talking to you, discussing these things, talking about American politics, talking about being in what is, in my opinion, even with its flaws, even with the way we're going today, still the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
Me being here today is an absolute miracle. And so all that to say, my interest in politics kind of began from a legal standpoint, looking at the adoption industry, because my parents, when they started discussing adoption, um, they didn't want to adopt domestically because there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of legal loopholes and different things and issues that could be had with the biological parent wanting to get me
Yeah.
back after a certain
Yeah.
point of time or whatever. And so they didn't want to have to deal with all that. And so knowing all of that got me inspired to go into something legal or political to try and get some reforms in the adoption industry because it's a place that there's a lot of issues that needs a lot of reform. And especially if I'm going to call myself pro-life, that's something that I want to fix, because one of the biggest critiques of pro-choicers towards the pro-life movement is that, oh, y'all only care about the baby before it's born. After it's born, you
Right.
don't
Right.
care. And
Right.
so I'm like, okay, so if we can fix the adoption industry and take away one of their biggest critiques, that's a win for us, right? So that's been something I've been wanting to work on for a long time. that and just kind of a whole host of other policy issues wanting to deal with that are on the national scene that kind of got me a lot interested in politics.
Sure.
So I get to Liberty. My first week on campus, I see this table in this hallway. It says College Republicans on it. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll join that. And so I joined, started doing door knocking for Republican Senate candidate Daniel Gade, I think it was in 2020, and a little bit for President Trump. Um, in 2021, I worked my way up to recruitment director for the club. Did some work with the Glenn Youngkin campaign, helped get Youngkin elected in Virginia, and then after that, I ran for chairman, got elected, kind of on a technicality because nobody else ran,
Oh
but
wow.
but got elected as chairman, and I've been serving in that position for the last 2 years. We've done a ton of work in and around Lynchburg and in Virginia. We helped to flip the city council from Democrat control to Republican control in 2022. We
Wow.
helped get Republican Congressman Bob Good reelected in 2022. This past election cycle, we helped get our House of Delegates delegate and our state senator reelected, Wendell Walker and Mark Peake. And we've done a ton of great work helping get students registered to vote on campus, help getting
Wow.
students involved, mobilized in the fight. Because it's one thing to sit on social media and like I do sometimes and spout off different things
Yeah.
and talk about your opinion. It's another thing to actually get people involved. And I'm not saying that I'm doing it any better than anyone else, but at the same time, I have a lot more respect for people when they not only talk the talk, but also go out there and get their hands dirty versus people that just are keyboard warriors and sit behind their screens and will spout off different things, even if they're on my side, even if what I agree with what they say.
Yeah.
I have a lot more respect for someone that actually goes out there and gets work done and is vocal on social media versus someone that just likes to spout stuff off.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. And wow, I mean, what an incredible story. I didn't know that about your upbringing and your background, and man, that is just that is heartwarming and inspiring. That really shows uh, God's care and His providence in how He takes care of His own. And awesome job on your parents for being willing to adopt, for going out of their way to do that. When I was serving active duty, we had a couple who were very focused on Russian adoption. In fact, the family themselves had adopted two kids. The father, the husband, was a translator or an interpreter in the Navy. And he was a Russian language interpreter. And he spent a lot of his time working in Russia to kind of what you're saying. I mean, not necessarily reform, but he was educating us on the adoption system and the orphan system in Russia, which is it's very sad. It's very
It
heartbreaking
is.
with the way that the adoption or the orphanages in Russia work. And it from what I mean, there are organizations out there, and there are some in Russia. I don't want to disqualify those that are doing the Lord's work in Russia, particularly the Russian citizens who love the Lord, who really do care for the kids that are out there, but they don't have a lot of the standards that we have in our orphanage system here in the United States. And so the checks and balances are kind of off. And it really is kind of, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the standards are just very low.
Yeah,
Uh,
from what I understand and from what I've been told from my parents, the standards are incredibly low. I know an example. They, yeah, I don't know if this is still the case. I imagine it may be, but in 2001, when my parents went over there, 2002, um, they orphanage workers, they weren't allowed to hold and coddle and babies, and they weren't allowed to like make eye contact or make any sort of emotional connection with babies, which if you know anything about child development, that's
yes,
horrendous. That's a
huge.
horrendously bad for the
That's
children.
yes, that impacts them for the rest of their lives. Yes.
hmm So yeah, so from what I understand, standards are very, very low, especially compared to the United States. And obviously we have our issues here, but at the same time, like you can recognize, and this goes beyond adoption. This goes with anything. You can recognize that there are problems and there are issues, but and still be grateful for how much of a blessing it is that of how
Yes.
we do it better.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, no system is perfect for sure. I think the best system would just be a non-financial one where a child is just able to be adopted right out without having to be in the system. And I think part of the American problem is that because there are finances involved, because there is social work involved, it delays the process, and so kids don't get adopted right away, even though there are people on waiting lists. I mean,
Hmm.
my wife and I were in the process of adoption when we were living in Washington State in 2000, let's see, about 2016, 2015 timeframe, before my daughter was born, because we both felt called to pursue that and pursue the adoption. And unfortunately for well, fortunately and unfortunately for us, uh, we were denied the adoption, but only because I was active duty and the home studies that would have been required. I moved around too much. Every 3 years, I had to go from one duty station to another. So they weren't able to perform a full home study in order to allow us to adopt. However, the Lord provided in that, and my daughter was born, or we got pregnant with my daughter, which we thought we were ultimately done naturally having kids. We wanted to focus solely on adoption, but the Lord provided, and we did have a daughter, which is really a testimony in and of itself. And I could share that, but I don't want to take time away from you. Um, so when it comes to your citizenship being adopted out of Russia, will that affect in any way any chance for you to hold political office?
Only the presidency.
Really?
Anything else,
Wow.
presidency and vice presidency, constitutionally, it is the requirement that you have to be a natural born citizen.
Wow.
Anything else, I'm clear. If I wanted to run
Okay.
for governor, I could. If I wanted to run for Congress, I could. And I do potentially want to run for Congress one day.
Yeah.
So we will see all in the Lord's timing if
Of
and when
course.
and how that looks. But that is something that I do hope to pursue one day, and that is something that will not be affected by the fact that I was born in a different country.
That's good. And maybe even in the case of getting into the Senate or getting into the House, perhaps you could even introduce legislation that would allow for circumstances of children that have been adopted from outside of the United States. In certain cases, I mean, obviously there are security
Yeah,
concerns and stuff like that.
I've certainly thought about it. Actually, funnily enough, shows how much of a nerd I am. When I was in ninth grade, I actually wrote out a proposition
No
amendment to the
kidding.
Constitution. I don't know if I still have it, but
Wow.
it's a difficult issue. It's something
Yeah.
I thought about long and hard. At this point in my life, I'm not sure if I'd feel comfortable. If it happens, it happens, and maybe I'd take advantage of it if it did.
Sure.
But I don't know if I would feel comfortable being the one to introduce that, just because I don't
Sure.
know how much of an impact that would end up having. That would be unforeseen, and that could
Oh yeah.
cause some issues. So I'm not going to be the one to do it. If somebody else wants to do it, go for it, and
Sure.
maybe I will. Maybe I'll take advantage of it. Who knows? But for
Yeah.
now,
Well, and that
I'm content with how it is.
and it's always going to be God's timing anyway. If the Lord doesn't want you to be the president, you're not going to be the president. I mean, I think
Right.
that's pretty. We can all agree that God sovereignly puts people in positions, magistrates, leaders, kings, rulers, all of that. He's the one that places those people in those positions. So if the Lord wants it, he'll do it, and we can all have confidence. That's ultimately why I have confidence, even in the chaos of our social system in our society today, uh, knowing that we are under judgment for what the Lord has done. We're are for what we've done for our rebellion. The Lord is, He uses leaders to judge nations. He uses kings to draw people back to Himself. We see that throughout Old Testament history. We see good kings. We see wicked kings. All for the purpose of either judging or blessing a nation. And I think that those principles still apply today. And I'm sure that you and I probably agree on that. Seeing where
Mhm.
we are currently in our political system and being under judgment, we've allowed a lot, and it's we get what we deserve in some ways, but I know that the Lord also is faithful in that he takes care of his people even when the rulers are wicked, even when the nation itself is under judgment. He works out all things for good for those who love him. And we can have a lot of solace and peace in God doing that. So yeah, that's very interesting, man. That's who knows one day if if you're not standing in front of a television prompter and saying, "Hey, I actually wrote this legislation when I was very young," and
Right.
you just never know, man. You never know
Who
what God
knows?
is going to do. Hindsight's always 2020. We can see God's moving usually
Mhm.
after the fact. We're like, "Oh yeah, God did that."
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And if I never end up becoming president of the United States, I'm perfectly content with my secondary retirement plan of becoming president of Liberty University one day. But
ooh,
we'll see.
that's awesome, man. That is so cool. I feel like in some cases, man, you have done more at this stage in your life than most folks have done, and you've definitely been through quite a bit. But I think those hard situations in your life have led you to where you are, and it gives you a very unique perspective. And a drive, it seems like that motivates you to seek change, to seek to honor God and glorify Him in our politics, in our society. um Man, what is it like on the college campus in 2024 now? What's the environment like? How vitriolic is the separation between the progressive side and the conservative side?
So I do want to um, just say that a lot of what I'm going to say is based off of hearing from others because
Sure,
at Liberty, things are a lot different than they are
of course,
anywhere else in the country. And even at Liberty, we still have some people, not nearly as many as at a state school, but there are still some people that disagree with the school's values, disagree with my values. There's still some debate that happens. There's still some pushback, and even sometimes the school will go out of their way to invite people for convocation who disagree with our stance just to start a conversation. Like for example, in 2018, they invited Bernie Sanders,
mm,
and I wasn't there for this, but I do remember watching and hearing about it. Bernie Sanders came and spoke at convocation, and the school was very clear, like, we disagree with almost everything this guy stands for, but let's have a discussion. Let's
amen.
see what we can talk about. Let's see what we can bring up. And you can go back and watch it. It was a very good convocation. I enjoyed watching it even before I was a college student. It made me excited to come to the school. And my experience has been about 90% of the guests agree with what the school says and what the school's values are. Sometimes you'll have somebody slip through. Like recently we had a convocation centered around a organization called Stand for Life. It was supposed to be a discussion solely about pro life. And one of the guests who was there found a way to sneak some social justice in there and to talk about some social
Interesting.
justice stuff. And credit where credit's due, Pastor Jonathan Falwell, who was leading that discussion, was very, very apt to say, okay, but let's bring it back to this, and let's bring it back to what this focus is. So credit where credit is due. I've seen some people accuse the school of going woke for even having them there and letting them
Oh wow.
speak.
Yeah.
That's not the full story. I can tell you that you can make whatever conclusions you want out of a 20-second clip. I was in the room. I know what happened. I've seen stuff behind the scenes with the school. I know what goes on there. Liberty's not going woke. They do have a little bit more of a Big Eva influence, but
Sure, sure.
I do think we're in a good place as a school, and I do think that the future is bright for I'll just say the future is bright for Liberty University and for the influence and impact it's going to have in the culture, especially with the students that it's producing. Going back to your original question, things are definitely tense across the country. Even we have a school called the University of Lynchburg that's just a few miles down the road from us at Liberty, and even just interacting with some of their students out in the town, out in the community, and hearing stuff from some friends that have that go there. It's tough. It's very, very tough to be a Christian, very, very tough to be a conservative on a college campus today that's not named Liberty or Hillsdale. Um,
Mm,
it's a hard time. And some people do believe that it's getting worse. Now, I have seen some signs of encouragement. For example, a few months ago, a poll came out that showed that high school seniors m- m- male high school seniors were growing to be more conservative, which is
yes. Yeah.
very encouraging. Now, female high school seniors were growing more liberal, which is a little bit discouraging, and that could spell some trouble for the future, especially in terms of like wanting to get married and the different things that come with that. At the same time, I do think that we are approaching a what's going to be kind of a nexus moment.
Yeah.
Kind of a even with the presidential race, say what you will about President Trump, I have a whole bunch of critiques of him, and I have a whole lot of respect for him for a ton of different things. That being said, it looks like at this point he's probably going to be the Republican nominee.
Yeah.
And even seeing polling coming out of swing states, seeing street interviews with people, seeing people realize Biden was a big fat mistake.
Yeah.
I'm voting for Trump if he's on the ballot again. Seeing that, especially among young people, and kind of how people are starting to wake up and realize, okay, some of these policies and some of these ideas and some of these people are actually not good for the country. I think we're in a really unique moment and we're in a really unique circumstance, and that if Christians like us can take advantage of it well, we have a very, very good shot to be able to propel ourselves further into the conversation and be able to make lasting change for the Lord and on behalf of the nation that will lead us to be in a place that is more God honoring as a country, and lead us to institute policies both on a state and a national level that will honor God and that will abolish some of these evils that we see in our
Oh yeah.
society, whether it be abortion or gay marriage or any of these other issues. We're in a very, very good spot. And as long as we are very strategic and we play our cards right, I think that we can take advantage of this.
Yeah, that's good, man. So what are your and again, if there's anything that I ask that you're just like, I don't really want to talk about it, that's totally
Hmm.
fine. What are some of your thoughts on Vivek Ramaswamy?
Ooh.
Obviously, he's yeah. I'll just say from the social media perspective and what I typically gather, a lot of folks aren't. They love what he says. They don't love his Hindu faith. They don't love the idea of putting someone in office that I mean, say what you want. Trump could say he could say he's a Christian all day long. Actions obviously prove whether that's true or not.
Right.
But at least he would be willing to say that he is a follower of Christ, which is kind of in contrast to Vivek. It's a difference. And so, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you feel
Yeah.
hopeful?
Yeah. So, with Vivek, it's kind of this weird spot. So
Say, I
obviously
feel the same way, dude.
his him
Yeah,
being a Hindu
yeah,
and practicing that is something that definitely gives me pause, because I would much rather prefer to vote for a Christian candidate, whether it be Donald Trump if he claims to be a Christian, or we can have debates over whether or not Roman Catholicism is legitimate in Christianity or
sure,
not.
sure.
But at least like somebody like DeSantis claims to be Catholic, and is actually, from what I can tell, somewhat serious about practicing. Um, but with Vivek, the thing that's weird is, even though he is not a Christian, he still, from what I've been able to tell in his through his policies and his social media, he's even said, I am not a Christian, but I still champion the same values that Christians do, and that I believe in a lot of these issues. And he's also the only person that I've seen actually bring up legitimate stuff about how Christians are being persecuted in America. I saw a clip from Trump recently where he started to talk about it, but before Trump even talked about it, Vivek was bringing up how in Ukraine right now the Orthodox Church is basically illegal. Um, he's talking about things that nobody else is discussing, and so it's weird. And so I even if I would not end up. And if Vivek became the Republican nominee, I'd swallow it. I'd swallow the pill and just vote for him.
Sure.
But in a primary, even if I wasn't to support him in the primary, having him out there discussing these topics is still a win
Yeah.
because it's shifting the Overton window. Instead of having just Nikki Haley and Mike Pence talk about whatever the heck they're talking about, you have
War in
somebody
the
that's
Ukraine,
yeah,
probably.
exactly, right. You have somebody that's actually bringing up these issues that matter and bringing up
Yeah.
things that nobody else wants to touch because they think that it's unelectable, and you can see it's making headways, and he's not going to win the nomination, probably not, but he's gained a lot of ground through discussing these hard topics that nobody else wants to even touch. And so even with him being a hint, he still makes me hopeful because it's like maybe people will see what he's doing and say, "Oh, wait, I can do that too. I can talk
Yeah.
about these things too." And he also, gives a very good strategy on how to use social media effectively because the dude is a master at it, and I think that's something that we can definitely learn from.
Yeah, I agree. I think, probably the best case scenario would be a Trump Ramaswamy ticket. I think, and as I've kind of talked to folks that are in my circles, that it seems like that's what a lot of people are kind of hopeful for. I'm still kind of watching Vivek with a skeptical eye, because my only complaint that I have for him is that he just seems to always have the right answer, and
Yeah,
that bothers me because I feel like that's too political, that's too, like, playing to your crowd or playing to your audience. Um,
yeah,
that
I know
does
what you
cons
mean.
Yeah, I mean, it does concern me a little bit. He's very well spoken. He has his finger on the pulse. I mean, he knows what people are concerned about. Matthew Anderson says Trump Carson 2024. Um, but I think that or Trump Vance. I think that
Vance would be good. Carson
yeah,
would be good too. I back when I first got into politics, looking at the Republican primary, I loved Trump's policies, and I also loved Ben Carson's just like demeanor. And
yes, very much so.
a lot of people say that he's too soft spoken, and I can kind of see that. But for the role of vice president, honestly, I think Vivek would be a great vice presidential pick. But I'd also love to see Trump go with Ben Carson because I think he has a lot of appeal that could that could help Trump down ballot for sure.
Well,
Um,
anybody that can speak in a sentence would be better than Kamala Harris. So,
that's true.
I mean, it's so frustrating to
It's time for us to do the things that we have been doing because the things that we do need to be done at this time.
at
you
this
know?
time to be doing them.
Right, right, right.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and and there might be a risk involved with being that Ramaswamy is such a he's such a bulldog that there may be conflicts between him and Trump, just because they're both such prominent personalities. You can see why Pence was Trump's pick the first time. Is he's a little bit more passive. He kind of like kept the playing, like, no one really, like, the worst that they could complain about Pence was that he didn't want to ride in a car with a woman that wasn't his wife. I mean, if that's the worst thing that you can say, like, I think we're doing okay.
Yeah, we're doing
uh
fine.
yeah, but then seeing Tucker interview Pence, that was definitely a big and obviously that's why he dropped off the
Mhm.
ticket too, is just that was the nail in the coffin, I think, for
For
him.
me, I think the biggest thing with Mike Pence is I still personally have a lot of respect for Mike Pence, the man.
Yes.
I think, and this is my personal opinion, maybe it's naive, I'm not sure, but personally, I think that Mike Pence has the best intentions, but just has bad advice.
Yeah.
I think that if he got better advice and he had better people around him, he'd be much different person in terms of policies and stuff. I still think that he is a genuine good person, but he made some big mistakes,
Right.
especially recently, and that's kind of shot him in the foot. So
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the new Speaker of the House? Do you have any
Mike
opinions on Mike
Johnson,
Johnson? Yeah.
yeah. So I did not necessarily meet, but when I was interning in the House, I had some close interactions with Speaker Johnson. Um, And from the things that I've seen behind the scenes, stuff that I've heard from my former boss, Congressman Dan Bishop, the best congressman in the House, about to be the best attorney general of any state in the United States pretty soon here. Um, I know that Congressman Bishop and some other congressmen, Bob Good, some other people that I've had interactions with, they like Johnson a lot and they think that he's a very good pick. I do have some concerns. I know that James White brought up the fact that he was involved in killing an abolition bill in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Um, I wish that I knew more about that situation and why Speaker Johnson chose to go the route that he did. That does give me some concern, as well as a couple other things that have happened. That being said, I do think that he is a lot better than Kevin McCarthy. I think that he's a lot more conservative than Kevin McCarthy. And even if there are concerns, which there are, he's still a net positive in my view,
Yeah.
and he's still an improvement. I think that he's doing a lot better of a job than McCarthy did. Um, he did cave on a CR. However, I do think that that was, even though I disagree with the spending bill, I do think that given the circumstances, I can see the justification for it. And he has kept some promises in terms of overspending stuff, like keeping single subject spending bills. It took him a week to do what McCarthy was not able to do in his entire tenure as speaker in terms of some stuff with spending. So there are some concerns, but I do think generally speaking, Johnson is a great step above McCarthy and has some promise to be a very good speaker.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you had stated about the when James White had brought up about the abolition bill, so I'm on the board for Abolish Abortion Missouri,
Hmm.
and I'm just now, and I haven't been on it for very long, so I'm still really learning the legislative process and how things go. And we recently had we had two bills that were we had one House bill and one Senate bill that had been put into place, and one of our representative Bob Titus was going to be supporting the House bill, and he ended up dropping out of it uh, relatively suddenly. The problem was he caved to a lot of the pressure from the some of the pro life orgs that are out here, because they really focused a lot on the fact that they make the argument that it's a punish women bill, which is obviously not the case. And we all, if you think about it and if you really dig into it, you know that it's not to punish women; it's to uphold the law. It's to keep equal protection under the law. It
Hmm.
is to consider all life and all life valuable. I mean that is the focus of any of these abolition bills. But one of the things that Titus had said to our director at Abolish Abortion Missouri was he felt like he had no support. He felt he had no constituent support towards the abolition bill, and so he caved to the pressure due to that. So, if anything, that should be an admonishment for those of us that do support these things to be more vocal about our support for these bills. And thankfully, Senator Mike Moon out here in Missouri is holding firm with his Senate Bill 775 in Missouri, which is an abolition bill. We'll see how that goes throughout the rest of this
Hmm.
season. But I do wonder, going back to Speaker Johnson, if he didn't have a similar case to Bob Titus out here, where he didn't feel maybe there was enough constituent support for the bill, and he caved to the pressure because the loudest voices, squeaky wheel gets the
Right.
grease many times. And if you don't feel like your
Hmm.
constituents are saying we want this, then you're not going to represent, you're going to represent those that are speaking the loudest to you. And so perhaps with guys like Senator Devers, who recently elected, Dusty Devers in
Right.
Oklahoma, maybe as we get more of these folks into office that can speak to the abolition movement, that maybe could get into the ear of Speaker Johnson, he would feel more empowered to support those sort of things. So in some cases, we're seeing an incremental change. We don't want
Hmm.
to see, incremental abolishment, but at the same time, if we can, like you said, a net positive, if we can start to see action on those sides and moving forward, then maybe we can see an actual shift.
Right, and that's one thing that I do have a little bit of a I consider myself personally an abolitionist, but at the same time, there's one small criticism I do have for our movement sometimes is things that are a win, we won't always take as a win.
Right.
Um, like, for example, like a heartbeat bill. Obviously, I want abortion completely abolished. I want to push for abortion to be completely abolished. I want to have a bill that completely abolishes abortion. But if the best of it I can get in the given moment is a heartbeat bill, personally,
Yeah, yeah,
we can have differences on this. Personally, I'll take it
yeah,
and use the momentum from that to push for more. And I see some on our side who will say abortion is legal until abortion was just legalized until heartbeat in such and such state. I'm like, I see what you're saying, but I don't agree with that rhetoric at all.
yeah.
And that's just that's a difference of opinion I have with some people.
Oh, sure,
And they have good intent. Like I believe they have good intentions, and I'm not going to criticize them for that.
yeah.
I just think that a lot of times we don't do a good job of seeing a win as a win and using that to build momentum.
Yeah, and that's kind of the Doug Wilson approach too, is what I've from what I've read about his stance on abolition is he does see the value in the incremental changes. And I would agree. I mean, again, this is my opinion, not representing Abolish Abortion Missouri in any way, but there are pieces, there are times where we can celebrate, there are times to mourn. um, I do want to see abortion criminalized. I want to see it completely illegal. And honestly, and do I want to see women punished? No. But I also know that the reason that people don't commit crime is because there is a penalty for committing said crime. And if
Right,
we don't penalize the thing, then it's not really a crime. It's not really outlawed. And so
right,
yes, my end goal is to see abortion abolished. But I do know, in God is sovereign. I'm going to press towards abolishment. I'm going to keep going that. But God is going to do it in His timing. He's going to do things His way. I do believe that we should honor God in our words and in our deeds, and I do think that that's why that's what keeps me more in the sense of promoting abolition is because I want to put the Lord's standards first. But in those cases, in those nuanced cases, and it's worth a discussion. There, we don't have to disparage everything. We can continue to press on without disparaging all things. And so
right.
again, nuance, but I do appreciate your clarification on that, Jesse. I think that's a good that's a good clarification, and we're all entitled to our opinions. We can have disagreements and still, seek to please the Lord and seek to serve him and lift him up. So good stuff, man. So for the last eight or so minutes before we close out, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your podcast that you're going to
Yeah.
be launching soon. Tell tell me what that's going to be like. What your focus is going to be. Do you plan on having guests? Is it going to be more of a solo venture? Go ahead.
Yeah, so for sure. So I am going to be launching first episode on January 26th, the revamping of the Jesse Hughes show. The Jesse Hughes show is something that has existed in the past and has not been active for about a year and a half at this point, I think, if not more. And so I am excited to bring it back and revamp it. Um, Kind of the idea in my head is I want to do one live show a month and the rest of them be pre-recorded. So my first show is going to hopefully be a live show, and then for the month of February, uh, for the first 3 weeks or so of February, do pre-recorded, and then last week of February do a live show, and kind of
Nice.
continue that model throughout the year. Um, I want to have as many guests on as I can.
Cool.
I'm always open to suggestions. You're welcome anytime.
Oh, thanks,
Um,
brother. I
yeah,
appreciate
for
that.
sure. But kind of the focus is it's going to be a threefold focus. The first focus is on politics, what's happening politically, kind of just a general overview of some of the biggest stories or some of the biggest themes or some of the biggest things that are going on in the political realm. A little bit of a focus on theology, whether it be maybe seeing how theology connects to what's happening politically in the country, seeing how theology connects to something in your anybody's everyday life, maybe just like a random like you've heard of Calvinism. This is what it is.
Sure.
Something like that. And then the last focus is I'm a huge sports fan, and I know that sports is a huge cultural connector. So I want to talk a little bit about sports. Talk about what's going on in the college football world. Talk about what's going on in the NFL a little bit because I think that conservatives sometimes do a bad job of
Mm,
connecting to what's popular and one of what's more popular in the United States than sports. We just had the college football playoff yesterday. Um, we had my Crimson Tide get beat through what I'm going to rant for a second.
Go
I do
for it,
not know
man.
what on earth Tommy Rees was thinking. For those that Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator for Alabama. I do not know what he was thinking. It is 4th and goal. You are 5 yards from the end zone. It is overtime. If you don't get this ball in the end zone, you lose. And so what do? They call a quarterback draw. They have 5 minutes to think of a play because Michigan called a timeout and then they called a timeout. He had 5 minutes to think of a play. And Nick Saban went out there and put him on blast and said, Tommy thought that this was the best idea for us. How is your play call a quarterback draw in this situation? Are you insane?
Yeah.
So our offensive coordinator lost us the game last night. So Michigan is in the college football national championship, and so is Washington, the Washington Huskies. I'm gonna be a Huskies fan for the next week because I hate Michigan. I hate everything to do with that
And
team.
I'm from Ohio, so I hate Michigan
Yeah, there you
also.
go. Jim Harbaugh is a cheater. That team sucks. I hate them. They can go down in flames. I don't
I love
care.
it. That's hilarious.
So having conversations like this is something
Yeah.
that can help have common build ground with average Americans that don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. So having a focus on sports, I think, is a good way to like be able to kind of push something out there. Because what I want to do with a lot of the clips from the show, and what I might do with some of the clips from even here, is like shorten them, post them to Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, the short clips, and
Yeah.
have them like build steam and traction and
Yes.
build engagement and help draw people into the show. And having some political clips that go viral and having some theological clips that go viral will be good, but also having some sports conversations and some discussions around sports is a way to reach an audience that would not be reached by the other two categories
Yeah, for sure.
necessarily. And so, it's something that I am passionate about and it's something I enjoy, so why not talk about it?
Well, I tell you, that is the key to any success, whether it's on a podcast or in life, is doing something that you are passionate about because people see fakes. They see
Mhm.
through fake people that are trying to just do something that, well, they get paid a lot of money to do, and you can tell that their heart's not really in it. So, anytime that you are passionate about, whether it's theology, whether it's sports, people see it and they see the genuineness of it, and they enjoy those conversations because then they feel like they're in the room with buddies. They feel like they're talking with friends and they want to be a part of that conversation. If it becomes so standard and scripted and kind of vanilla, people are, they'll go find something else. You
Right.
should get Johnny Root. I think would be a great guest for you.
I'd love to have them.
Uh, yeah, I think he would be. I think he'd be perfect. In fact, he did agree to do an episode of this show at some point, and I have got a few people lined up for the future. So maybe if I can get into his ear for you as well as you get your show running and off the
Yeah.
ground.
I've had a little bit
Um,
of interaction with Johnny on Twitter.
Good.
I think obviously I don't think he knows who I am, but I think he's seen me enough on interacting on Twitter to know that I have a little bit of a presence in that. If I
Yeah.
invited him on the show, I think they would say yes. So I'd love to have him on. I'd love to have a ton of people on. I'd love to reach big and have some really big names come on. And I think that I hopefully have some connections to be able to pull some stuff off. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the worst thing that they can say is no, man. But you
Yeah.
you don't get anywhere if you don't ask. I had unfortunately, due to some circumstances, Father Calvin Robinson out of the UK was going to be on
Hmm.
our show, and he had to cancel because this was right around the time that GBN dropped him from their programming,
Mm,
and some things fell through the crack. But in November, he was going to be on the show, and I was really looking forward to talking to him. He's such an interesting character, especially as an Anglican. I don't know a lot about Anglicanism. I don't really have very many friends that are, but I mean, everything that I've ever heard him say has been very based, very God honoring, and so yeah, reach big, man. Go for those big names. You'll find people that are interested. Some people just are cool with like, hey, you're a brand new show, but I'm interested to give you a little time, and So just, yeah, don't take no for an answer. Just keep pressing
Right.
and doing that. And then you'll be like me one day and you'll get a guy like Jesse Hughes on your show and you'll be excited to have him on. Um,
Hey, man, we'll see.
well, man, I really appreciate having you on. I think if there are more Jesse Hughes type personalities out there in the college world, I feel a lot of peace towards the future of our country. And I just want to encourage you, man, to just hold true to the word, hold true to what you know
Mhm.
is true. Honor God with what you do, put him first, tear down idols and destroy your own sin. Those are the best things that you can do. And I think God is gonna be in that. Um, last minute thoughts. You got anything else so people can find you obviously on Twitter,
Yep.
Instagram? What are your handles over there?
Yeah, so my, on Twitter, Instagram, and, I do use TikTok only because I think that it's a good way to reach people.
Yeah,
The is at jhughes, Hughes 1776.
nice,
You can find me there. You can find the page for my show at Jesse Hughes Show on Twitter,
nice.
and you can go if you want to go and support college Republicans. Our handles are at CRLU 71, College Republicans of Liberty University. We really could use and we would love any sort of support, whether it be prayer, monetary support, anything that people could give. We are self funded. We do all of our stuff through fundraising and donations. We don't get any money from anybody. So, if you would love to help out our mission and help support us, we'd love that. Um, but yeah, you can find us there, and you can find me at jhughes 1776, wherever. And yeah,
Awesome, brother. All right. Well, I appreciate it. We'll stick around for a couple seconds after I close the show out. Thanks, guys, for joining us. This is our 52nd episode of the Doctrines of Rad. Hopefully, we're going to get more consistent in our programming here. I know it's been the holidays has taken us back a little bit, but we have a whole backlog of 51 other episodes that you can watch. We try to get guests on as often as possible. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jesse, for coming. And
thank you for having me.
God bless you guys. We'll catch you later.